Hi guys. Why am I laughing? Because this is take 2. I don't know. The camera just freaking crapped out a couple minutes ago, and I was about 2/3 of the way through this, and it's like, all right, well, let's try it again. So I hope it works this time. What do you say, Kyle? Kyle, you want to say hello to everyone? You know, it's our last time. Come here, Kyle. Come on, buddy. Come on, Kyle. Yeah, Kyle. Here, sweetie. Oh, he's all suspicious now because I want him. So that's how cats are. Penelope, come up here. So I hope we get through this one without the camera crapping out. I don't know. Something between the link, between the camera and the iPad. So we're going to talk about hope, featured emotion. Boy, I mean, I think hope is getting a lot of us through the pandemic. We're hoping for better times. We're hoping for vaccine. We're hoping for the end of the pandemic, or liberation from lockdown, so to speak. And also, you know, I hope that by following the instructions of not going out, or when I do go out and wear a mask, etc., I hope that I'm ensuring greater probability of the health of other people. So this is kind of how hope works. Kyle, I wanted you to come up here but not jump on the computer. Come on, buddy. So let's talk hope. And I really wanted to close out the course with this one, so I did some renumbering. Maybe it doesn't match up completely to your syllabus. Barack Obama's The Audacity of Hope. My wife and I bought this book when Barack was considering his candidacy for presidency, because we wanted to find out what he was about, right? So, and we read President Obama's book, and I remember saying, this is really nice. I really like his concept of hope. I'm not sure, because he's a politician, that this is real or authentic, because I have a native suspicion of people running for political office. But it appears that it was pretty much true to who he is. So hope is not blind optimism. It's not ignoring the enormity of the task ahead, right? Or the roadblocks that stand in our path. It's not sitting on the sidelines or shirking from a height. Hope is a thing inside us that insists, despite evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to read for it, and to work for it, and to fight for it. Hope is the belief that destiny will not be written for us, but by us, by the men and women who are not content to settle for the world as it is, but have the courage to remake the world as it should be. And those are lofty words, but words to aspire to. And a beautiful synopsis of incorporating the elements of hope that I'm going to expand on as we move through this. Now, a bunch of you have chosen to write the paper on emotion and art. And you've seen throughout the course that I've used examples of art, music, sculpture, paintings, photographs, etc., as a way to freeze that moment in time and express emotion. And in looking for an image that portrays hope, and note that as we come out of Lecture 9, and I brought up the term idiosyncratic, so I admit this is idiosyncratic, but this image exudes hope to me. Now, hope for what is unclear, right? But notice she's on a train. She's going somewhere. She's going somewhere. And is it that she's leaving somewhere, or is it that she's going somewhere? She's got this gift on her lap. At least it appears to be a gift. She's got her traveling companion with her. But this wistful look reminds me of hope. Is she hopeful about what then is going to be at the station of her arrival? Is she hopeful for what she's left behind and what it means? Regardless, you can see how images can evoke emotion, and I hope that you're tight with that as we come to the conclusion of this course. Now, hope often has incorporated into it rays of light, or some kind of light in imagery. That's a common theme for hope. Or especially seeds sprouting and growing and coming to fruition in somewhat hostile environments. And we can see how that's often a metaphor for hope. We have hope cliches and phrases. Ray of hope, glimmer of hope, hope springs eternal, It's always darkest before the dawn, right? John Lennon, who's like the ultimate peacenik, right? And fighter against war, at least of my generation, right? Post Beatles, Lennon was on a mission of peace, even with the Beatles, but fully embraced post Beatles. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And notice the hope that conveys. Right? I may be a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope that we get together and we realize these dreams, right? It's implied in this. But then again, Margaret Mitchell comes back at us and says, look, life is under no obligation to give us what we expect. And the danger of expectations, huh? Let's differentiate hope versus wish. Hope is a desire for something good or positive in the future. It's often used to express a desire, right, for an event, situation, action to happen in the future, and it's used as the present simple tense. I hope she gets better, which means that it's possible. And note that, when my mom was descending into Alzheimer's, and this is the thing that we have to face with dementia and Alzheimer's, given our current medical technology, people don't get better. People descend into dementia or Alzheimer's, and you can no longer hope. It's not reasonable to hope that they get better because it's so unlikely to happen. It says they're not going to get better. What you can hope for is I hope you're in a situation that makes them comfortable. I hope she's in a situation that diminishes her anxiety and gives her last couple months, years, etc., whatever it is, a certain degree of pleasantness, right? You can hope for those things because they're somewhat under your control. But Alzheimer's is a bastard, and it just takes the brain, and there's no recovering from it with our current technology, right? So, I hope she gets better. Okay, for certain, disorders or certain medical problems, that's reasonable. But for others, it probably just doesn't make any sense. I hope we see each other again, and I sure do hope we see each other again. The sad news is, and the reality of it is, some of us may never see each other again in person. In the next semester, many of you will graduate, and classes are for the most part going to be online. They're virtual next semester, so we may not get a face-to-face to say goodbye, and that's sad. Have you ever said, "I hope I pass my test"? Well, that's a legitimate use of the word hope. I hope you pass your test too. Right? Now, wish, on the other hand, let's differentiate to wish. It's a desire, something that is unlikely to happen, right? Or actually impossible to happen. And it's used to express desire for something, right, that's not real now. So I wish I had a bigger house. Or I wish I'd studied medicine. And it's like, I can't hope to study medicine. I'm 62 years old. I'm not going to go to medical school and go through all that. It's just not rational, reasonable, etc. So I could wish I studied medicine, but hope would be an incorrect word to use in that case. I wish I didn't have a big test tomorrow. Any of you ever said that? Of course we have said that as students. I wish there was no test tomorrow. Well, you can wish all you want. You just better show up on time anyway, right? I wish I could learn English faster. Those of you in an in a language class, I wish I could speak fluently, but I don't. And the only way it's going to get there is hard work. I wish I were taller, and hey, legitimately, that's mine. I hit 5'8", and that was the end of it. That's 2 inches shorter than the average American male. And height matters. I often ask students, I say, hey, and just for the women in the class, let me be sexist for a minute, just for the women, and let's limit that to heterosexual women. And I ask, and I say, be honest now, for how many of you is height a deal killer? Seriously, for how many of you women you won't consider partnering up with a guy because he's too short? And that's okay to admit that. It's okay to feel that way. That's not what this is about. But what it means is that shorter men do suffer a certain disadvantage in that regard. But hoping that they get taller is not going to make it happen. Right? I mean, that's just not going to make a difference. I can hope I'm going to get taller until the cows come home, but it's not going to change my height. So I wish I was taller. Makes sense because it's unlikely to happen. And that's how the language is used. So Is hope an emotion? And we've been asking this question throughout the course around many different phenomenon. Is love an emotion? Is hatred an emotion? Remember that was from 9.1. Is hope an emotion? Well, Averill will come down on the side. Yeah, the findings portray hope as an emotion that occurs when an individual's focused, right, on an important positive future outcome. The individual may see positive outcomes as somewhat unlikely and still expect it to occur. Thus, being hopeful, right, helps people to maintain an approach-based kind of behavioral squalor, despite their present inability to reach that desired outcome. So is hope a syndrome? An emotion? Is it a theory? Well, we can easily look at it as a theory, and we could probably make an effective argument that it's a syndrome. The most difficult stance to argue is probably that hope is an emotion. So, Rick Snyder's hope theory, it's a process of goal-directed thought that reflects both the belief that one can find a way to get there and has the ability to get there once the path has been found. So pathways thinking is, hey, these are the various paths I could take to get there. The agentic thinking is I can successfully move down that path to the end of the path, right? So therapy of this type is designed, it focuses on as a tripartite, kind of therapy design. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which most of us are familiar with, that is, we really work on committing the appropriate behaviors and work on our perceptual process associated with those behaviors. Solution-focused therapy really ties to the pathways thinking. What are the potential solutions? What are the potential pathways? And then the narrative therapy comes back to telling the story of who we are. And that's where we can derive our self-efficacy or our sense of agency. That we have stories, narratives of previous successes that will apply to the current challenges. So then the tenet of hope theory, we got the goals thinking, consistent emphasis on focused goals of the future. So hopeful people tend to be future oriented, but it makes sense, right? But it requires pathways thinking. It's not just to know where I want to be, but it's able to discern various paths that I might use to get there. And then the agency thinking, again, is the belief that I can successfully move down that path to the goal. Okay. So, again, in summary, have a goal, determine paths to get to that goal, and have the belief that you can be successful moving down one of those paths. Just like when I got to graduate school. I want to become a social psychologist. I want a PhD in social psychology. Pathway? Well, apply to graduate school, right? Okay, I can do that. And then once I got into graduate school, now, can I accomplish it? Yeah. I'm just going to move through on a day-to-day basis the things I need to do to successfully complete my degree, my PhD. So that's kind of how it works, right? Yeah. Where does hope stand in relationship to other positive emotions, if we want to call it an emotion? Well, we can see positive emotions like gratitude and forgiveness, right? Joy, the managing moods. We might, inject more humor and fun. We might avoid negative triggers and engage in positive triggers. We might, manipulate our positive to negative ratio. And how many of you will limit your social media exposure because of the anxiety-provoking effects of that exposure? Right? So we can manage our moods, and that's part of emotional intelligence. Notice the relationship of love and sharing good news as positive emotions, if you will. Remember our discussion of Confucian's savoring. There it is. Awe is just being blown away by the absolute beauty of some element, other forms of awe as well. And here's hope and optimism. And it's not the only and it's not the main positive emotion, but certainly exists within this kind of integrated map of positive emotion experience. Let's get a little more detailed and talk about hope components. What do we see? There doesn't seem to be a biological correlate to hope, right? What physical phenomenon do we experience in a state of hope, right? It's probably not a physiological, not a sympathetic nervous system activation, nor parasympathetic nervous activation. More needs to be studied in that regard. But then we can ask the question, and I've asked this question a couple times to you guys, well, if it ain't, then what is most similar to it? And that's what is a similar state of motion that might have a biological component, right? That's similar to hope. And that's something you can think about or explore. But it appears to be neither automatic nor reflexive. So we move on to the cognitive, and we see hope then includes appraisal process. And yes, I can appraise, is that goal desirable? Yes, I want to move towards that goal. And then I appraise, will this pathway get me here? So that's part of the appraisal. And then can I move down this path successfully? And that's yet another appraisal. So appraisal seems to be very much tied up into the process of hope. So certainly a cognitive component. Linguistically, I mean, hope is embedded in us. And structuralism, that's, this is the part of structuralism. Hope's a common word. I sure hope. And plenty of cliches, proverbs, maxims. Hope is a concept in, I think, virtually every religion. And notice that religion is a highly structural phenomenon. But so certainly hope is something that we're taught, that's available to us, that we can learn. We can find models of hope. We can find advice on hope. So it exists powerfully as a cultural or social element. Behavioral. Well, there's behavioral components to hope. Self-talk. That is, we can give ourselves pep talks that help move us down a difficult path. Or as when President Obama described in Audacity of Hope, he says this is something we work towards. This is something we fight for, right? So that's self-talk. You got this. You can do this. I know it's hard, but you can do this, right? And then the choice of hope-inspiring activities. So we choose things that support our notion of hope, allow us to demonstrate our self-efficacy. And this can also be choice of hope-inspiring activities as hanging with people who are hopeful. And then certainly there's the motivational component of hope, because if we hope, then it implies we have a motivation necessarily to hope and to persist to achieve our goal that we hope to achieve. So if we put this together, then the self, the agent part, right, that's us, and we demonstrate efficacy expectations. You got this, I can do this, right? The means is often the pathway that is direct towards the goal, and that's where the outcome expectations yield into the end, the control. So that we see a means-ends kind of relationship, but it starts with the self and the belief that we can do it. Right? So the self-action control model of perceived control. Yes, I am capable of making this decision and making these choices. I have a path available to me that will lead to the desired ends. To the extent that I have control over this, then it's attainable, right? To the extent that I don't believe I have control over this relationship, then my hope diminishes. Right? And if we look at Seligman and his discussion of learned helplessness would be the idea that I have no perceived control over this relationship, so I'm helpless rather than hopeful. And hopeful and helpless might be on the opposite ends of the continuum. So no hope? Well, close your eyes and imagine having no hope. Now, what feelings arise? What emotion might be occurring here? Now do the opposite, and this is a thought experiment, right? And what feelings arise? So does it have a physiological component? I don't know. This might be one way to look at it, but certainly it has a cognitive component because we're able to do this. What are some associates to hope then? Well, maybe a sense of empowerment might increase. If I feel empowered, then it might increase my sense of hopefulness. Right? Motivation, to the extent I'm motivated, might increase my relationship to hope. Approach, orientation, patience, that is, it's not going to happen, let's say, like yesterday. Right? Confidence, and that gets back to the self-efficacy. And the resilience, because remember, President Obama said we have to be able to surmount the obstacles and be willing to face the obstacles, and that really demonstrates a resilience. Now, we've often seen, this idea that hope is woven into the fabric of America. And so many of our people, so many of our ancestors have come to America on the basis of hope. I know the Polifrones and the Zorzes came to America hoping for a better life, and they felt that America was the pathway. And if they got to America, they were confident in their abilities to move towards greater goals, greater attainment of what they wanted, right? So America, for many people, has represented hope in the past. Big question is, does it still? And is this all bullshit? Is it just ethnocentrism at work in the first place? So agentic thinking, putting it all together. We need agentic thinking, I can do this, and we need pathways thinking, I will find a way to get this done. So self-efficacy and mastery motivation, two components central to putting it all together in terms of hope. Now, we mentioned the word resilience, right? If we move back in time from positive humanistic psychologies, like Seligman, right, like Rogers, we find ourselves at the existential movement. So that was kind of the evolution, right? Think about Viktor Frankl, and I know a lot of people in psychology of adjustment have chosen to read Frankl's work, Man's Search for Meaning, right? And in this, Frankl describes his experience in Auschwitz and the observations he made when he was swept up into the Auschwitz concentration camp, and death became the norm. And it's random death, and it's unplanned death, and it's capricious death. And one never knows if they'll survive another day or their life will be taken from them in a most horrific fashion, right? But what Frankl observed and what led him to change, his career path, so to speak, and write this book, was that people somehow maintained hope in the most dire of circumstances. And he coined the term resilience. That is, the people who can face death on a daily basis and yet still hope for better are people who demonstrate resilience. Now, others later coined the term hardiness, and I'm thinking especially Kobasa and Mahdi, right? They developed trainings to teach this, and hardiness training is still taught at University of California, Irvine by Mahdi and Kobasa's people. Currently in vogue is the term grit, and that is that kind of stick-to-itiveness attitude. So leaders on hope? Well, Churchill gave the British people hope. When all looked lost, when they're having the crap bombed out of them by the Germans, and they believed that invasion was imminent, Europe had fallen, and it looked like America didn't want to get into the war, so it looked like Great Britain against everyone else, basically, Great Britain alone. What did Churchill do? Most importantly, he offered people hope on a daily basis. And this statement, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. And with him, he brought the British people along to stem the Nazi tide, at least delay the Nazi tide until America got into the game and the Soviet Union geared up and was able to combat the threat of Nazism. So the horrendous threat and destruction imbued in Nazism. Right? So messages of hope have come from many leaders, and we look at Dr. King, we look at Mahatma Gandhi, we look at John F. Kennedy. All these people preached a message of hope to us. All sought to motivate concerted effort from people to follow a visionary path against all odds. Right? And that's what hope is about. And that's what we can teach our children. So guys, this is it. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great semester. And I hope things move forward for you in a way that you hope that they do. So let's say goodbye. Terrence, goodbye. Take care.